Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, I have already discussed about that things with you, how can create your all that models, and also after that we migrate it. That means we have already created one of the database, and into this database we have created two of this database table. One is our model, another is our album, right? And also into this musician table I have defined three of this field. One will be as a first name, last name, and the instrument. So now I want to insert some of the data, in particular this all that field. So if you want to insert it, you have to insert it by the object. That means when any data will be inserted into this database, all that field, it should be inserted by the object. So everything as a call as an object. So now I want to add some of the object in our first name field, in our last name field, and also the instrument field. So how can do that work? In this video, I will show you that things with the live example. For doing this, first of all, we have to open our terminal. So I just open our terminal. So that is our project directory, and into this project directory, first of all, we have to go to our shell. Like here, you have to write down as a Python, and then you have to define as a manage.py, and then shell. So I just simply define as a Python, a manage.py, and the shell. So now if you click as a enter, so now you can see it's now redirected to our database shell area. That means with this shell here, I want to insert all the data in our particular this all that database table. So now here, first of all, we have to import our all that models, right? Like here in our fast tab, into this fast tab, I have defined our models into this models, that is our models. So now first of all, you have to import it. So if you want to import it in particular that shell area, you have to define as a from. That means from where it should be inserted, from our this fast tab, and into this fast tab, that is our models, right? So now I just simply define as a fast, okay, fast underscore app, our folder name, and then into this folder that have also the models. So I just simply define as models, and from to these models I want to import. So I just simply define as import, and import our which data. I want to import our this class, that means our this table, our table name as a musician. So I just simply define as a musician. Okay friend, I hope it should be very much clear to you. So from our fast tab models, I want to import our this table, that is our musician table. So I just simply define our musician table. So here, if you want to add multiple field, like here, if you want to add that multiple table, then you can also defining it with the comma, then album. So this type of things you can define. Okay, so if you want to add that multiple table, then you can add that table on here. So right now I only want to insert the data, that means our object data in our musician, that means musician table. So right now it's okay with me. So now if you click as a enter, now you can see it's now redirected our main shell area, that means in our musician area. So now first of all, I want to check it, is there have any data is already added or not. So if you want to check it, it's pretty much simple things. I just simply define as a print. Okay, I just print, I want to print it, I want to check it in our musician. Into the musician, I want to check all that our objects. Okay, I just simply define as objects and all. So objects, all the data. So first of all, I want to check it, is there have any data in our this table, that means musician table or not. So as I told you, every data, it means that actually objects. Okay, so here I just simply define as a print in our musicians table. I want to define all that objects. So here I just simply define as objects and all the data. So now if you click as a enter, now you can see it's now showing as a blank. That means here right now I don't have any data. So now I want to insert some of the data. So if you want to insert it, like here I define as an object one of the variable. Okay, so I just simply define as object one of the variable, and here with this in our musician table. So into this musician table, I want to define all that our fields. So right now our field name. So our field name as a first name, the last name, and the instrument. So now first of all I want to define as a first name. Okay, so I just simply define as a first. Make that sure your spelling is correct. So that is our first underscore name, because that's all that our database field name, right? So into this first name here, I want to define that first name. So I just simply define that first name like as a Kazi. Okay, and also after that I want to define another one. Better here, I want to define our another field as a last name, last underscore name. And for the last name, I want to define another name, so it will be as a Aryan. Okay, Kazi Aryan. And also they have the another field, our field name as a instrument, right? That means the instrument. So here I defining it. So into this instrument field, here I want to define that instrument name will be as a like guitar. Okay, I just name it as a guitar. So friend, I hope you can well understand about it. So I just take one of the object, and into this object in our musician table, into this musician table, our first name, into this first name I want to insert that Kazi, and into this last name I want to insert that as a Kazi, and in the instrument here I want to insert as a guitar. Okay friend, so here I want to insert all the data in our this table, that means the musician table. So now if you click as a enter, so now we have to save it. So here I want to save this object data into this database table. So if you want to save it, then you have to define as an object, and into this object I want to save all the data. So I just simply define as a save. Okay, so now click as a enter. So now you can see every data is saved in our database table, that means in our musician table. So now I want to create another object. I want to create another object, and I also want to insert another data. So better I just simply define the same things as an object, and then in our musician, into the musician I have to define our first name field. So here I define as a first underscore name, and for the first name I want to define as a Jack. Okay, and Jack, and also in our last name field, into the last name field I want to insert our another data. Here I want to insert as a Jack Ma. Okay, and then also after that in our installment field, into the installment field I want to insert as a violin. Okay, violin, I just simply define as a violin. So this type of one of the data I want to also insert it in our musician table. So that is our first name field. Into the first name field it will be saved as a Jack, and last name it will be saved as a Ma, and the installment, that is INSTRUMENT. Perfect. And then here I also want to insert our installment name as a violin. So now I just click as a enter, and now we have to also save it. So I just simply define as an object, and into this object data I want to save it. So I just simply define our object data and save it. Perfect. So now if you want to check it, all the data is successfully inserted or not. So if you want to check it, like right now I want to print it again. So before I have already checked it, so it's now showing, before it's showing as a empty. So now I want to check it again. So I just simply define our musician table. Into the musician table I want to check all that object. Okay, objects and all. So I just simply defining it. So print our musician table. Into the musician table I want to check all that objects. So I just simply define as objects all, and now click as a enter. Yes, now you can see friend, now it's actually showing our data. So before that was actually display as a empty. Right now I have already inserted two of this data. For the reasons here you can see it's now showing as a musician this object 1 and the musician object 2. So here I have inserted two of this data, so now it's perfectly display on here. That means we successfully added our all that object in our specific this table. So here if you want to visible your all the data, that means here I have inserted that Kazi, Aryan, and the guitar, and the Jack, Ma, and the violin, right? So here if you want to actually display these data, so right now you can see it's now only showing that object. There have one object, there is another second object. But here if you want to display your all that data, then you have to update it. Like in our that position here, in particular that area, you have to update another option. So I just simply define as a div. So you do this div here, you have to define as a str. Okay, that means the str, and with this str you can defining it. So I just simply define that one of the self. So I just simply define as a self. Okay, so with this self you can actually display it like here. I just simply define as a round returned, and with this self. So with this self I want to display our which data. I want to display our first name. I want to display that first name, and after that I just simply define as a plus, and then here I just put on the spaces, and after that I also want to display our last name. So our last name will be as this one field name. So I just simply define as the last name. Okay, so if you want to display it, before display that last name, you have to define that self. So I just simply define as a self dot all last name. Perfect. So I just simply define as a div, and with this stern, with this is one of the default function. With this here, I will define as a self, and then return self our first name. So it should be display our first name. That means first name field data, and also I want to define another one as a last name field data. Okay, so now I want to save it. I just click on the save all. And now let's check this out. And as I told you before, if you make any changes in your models area, then you have to run 3 codes, right? So now we have to actually run it again. That means we have to migrate it again. So first of all, from here I want to exit. So I just simply exit from here. Okay, so now that is our project profile. Into this project folder here, I have to run our same code again. So as a Python manage.py and then migrate. So now click as a enter. Yeah, and then after that we have to run our another code as a Python, and then our manage.py and then make migrations. Okay, into the make migration our fast step. So our fast step name as a fast underscore app folder. That means that is our fast app folder. So I just simply define as a Python manage.py and then make migrations. Okay, migrations and then fast app. Now click as a enter. Here you can see it's now showing as a no changes detected in our app. That means fast app. And after that we have to also run our same code. That means the Python manage and migrate. So I just simply define as a Python manage.py. So it's pretty much common one of the code. You have to remember it. Okay. So I just simply define a migrate, RATE. Great. So now click on the enter. So here I migrate our database. So now I want to redirect our cell again. So if you want to go here, you have to define as a Python, right? Python and the manage.py and then shell. Click on the enter. So now we are into the shell area, and into the shell area, first of all, I want to import it. That means import our musician. So I just simply define as a from. So I have already discussed about that things with you. From our which table, that means from our which folder, our fast step folder, I want to access this models, and into this models, that is our table name as a musician, right? So I just simply from our fast underscore app, and from our fast app I just simply define the models. Okay, that means in our fast app, and that is our models. Into this models I want to import it first. So I just import it in our from here. I want to import our this musician. So I just simply define our musician table. So now if you click as enter, so now we are in musician. So now I want to print it. So I want to print our musician. Okay, our musician table and all that objects and all. So I want to now print it again. That means our print in our musicians, all that object I want to display. So now if you click as a enter, yes, now you can see friend, now it's perfectly display our name. That means here in our musicians table I have inserted one of the Kazarian. Because of all here you can say I only added our first name and then a space our last name. And here if you use that instrument, then also it will be visible. So right now I have already defined our first name and the last name. So now you can see it's now showing as a Kazarian, and also I have saved another data as a Jack Ma. I hope it's very much clear to you friend. So in our next video I want to discuss about that admin side. So by default Django providing some of the admin panels. So in our next video I will show you how can logging into this admin panel and how can read all this data. So every data will be saved in our database, that means in our backend. So how can access your admin. In our next video I will show you that things with a live example. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.